All right, thank you for joining us today on Coffee With. My guest today is Dr. Chris Collins. Dr. Collins is an optometrist here in town, and he owns Collins Eye Clinic.
Mm-hmm.
I got that right?
That's right.
Okay. But I don't really want to talk to you today about being an eye doctor. I want to talk to you about, you defined this, or at least you told me what it was, astrophotography. I was in your office probably about a year or so ago for an eye exam, and I was in the exam room, and I saw all this photography, and you had your laptop up, and I saw it on there, and I got to thinking that must be your work. So I called you a few weeks ago and said, hey, what was that? And you told me what it was, and I was just so fascinated by it. And I really still don't know what it is. So let's start with that. Tell me why it's called astrophotography and exactly what is it?
Okay. Well, basically, astronomy is the study of stars, space. Astrophotography is basically looking through a telescope and taking a picture through it of what you see.
How do you do that?
We attach a camera to the back of a telescope. Of course, you have to get it focused and all, and then depending on what type of photograph it is, it may just be a simple snapshot. Like the moon only requires the same thing that you would do. You could actually take your camera and focus it on the moon and take a picture. Of course, the moon would be small, but if you put it on a telescope, then the moon fills up the whole picture. And that's a very short exposure, on the order of 1/1000th of a second exposure time. The deep space photographs, I typically have 5-minute exposure times, so you're leaving the shutter open for 5 minutes. And I want to get a series of those. I try to get 50 to 100 of those in order to combine them to make one image. And the reason you do that is because the cameras nowadays are pretty much digital. Film is still there, but almost a thing of the past.
Right.
And with digital, you have a lot of built-in noise. It's called electronic noise, and so you have to average a bunch of photographs in order to get rid of that noise, because the things you're photographing are very, very dim.
Now, when you say noise, you don't really mean sound, do you?
Not sound noise, but electronic noise. For example, if you put the lens cover over the camera,
Yes.
and took a 5-minute exposure, and then you looked at it, it would be black. But then when you brighten it and stretch the contrast and do all the things you do to it, all of a sudden you see all these color splotches in the photograph, and that's the digital noise.
Okay. So were you a photographer that got interested in astronomy, or were you an astronomist that got interested in photography?
Astronomer that got interested in photography.
Okay, so how did you get interested in the astronomy?
Always been interested in that. When I was, I guess I was 8 or 9 years old when we landed on the moon. And so boys my age, almost all of them, you ask, what would you want to be when you grow up? And that's an astronaut. So you have that little bit of space involvement there. Well, I ended up in college taking one class of astronomy as an elective, one semester, and that pretty much hooked me there. At the time, obviously, I did not have the means to buy the equipment to do it, but my first astro photograph was of Halley's Comet when it came by. I believe it was 1985. And I just took a camera, regular 35mm film camera, stuck it on a tripod, opened up the shutter I did a series of, 2-second, 5-second, 10-second, 20-second, and 30-second exposures. And then that was my first thing. Never touched it again for, 20 years?
Really?
Yeah.
And so when did you start doing it again? When did you start doing
I think it was around 2003 or 4.
Not that long ago.
Right. And actually haven't been doing any of it in the last couple of years.
So do you have to have some specialized equipment for this?
Yes, the telescopes are fairly conventional, although the more expensive the telescope, the better your picture.
Yeah.
The camera is a Canon 20D digital camera, but now it is modified. The digital cameras have a filter on the chip itself that filters out most of the ultraviolet and UV and infrared radiation that comes through. So in order to take astrophotography pictures, you want a lot more of that infrared to come through. In other words, some of the pictures that are on the disc that he'll be showing have a lot of red in them. And before I had the modifications made, that red didn't even show up. So in that respect, it is a little bit modified, but a lot of things like the moon and the planets and things like that you can take with an unmodified camera.
So how did you know when you started doing this that, I mean, you took the pictures and you looked at them and thought, doesn't have enough red in it, I need to modify? I mean, how do you know to do those
Well,
kinds
you
of things?
read.
Okay, magazines and...
Magazines, Sky and Telescope is my favorite astronomy magazine.
Yeah.
But also Yahoo groups. They have specific groups that deal with astrophotography.
How do you actually attach the camera to the telescope?
It's a regular T-mount, I believe is what it's called. You can buy it at any camera shop.
And do you go different places to take these pictures, or can you just go out in the backyard?
You can go in the backyard. Now, most of the pictures, my best pictures, were taken somewhere besides my yard. The reason being is I'm fairly close in town here. I'm on Porter's Chapel Road. And so even being there, there's light pollution from the city. We used to go to star parties, which is a group of folks that gather that do nothing but telescopes, and most of those are just visual. They don't take pictures. But you have the group that do take the pictures, and we're the ones that stay up all night with our cameras taking the pictures with the shutters open. So, and sleep a couple hours during the day and then get up and start working on the photos and then start all over again. So we do that for a week.
Now, have you ever gone like out west?
I haven't been there yet. That is on my list of things to do because of course, you want to be in a dark site, which is away from city lights. You also want to be as high as you can get, which means mountains, and as dry as you can get, which means desert. So that's about the three main ingredients that make a really good photograph.
And so do you do this frequently now that you've gotten into
Actually,
it?
no, I don't. I moved my practice about 3 years ago, and that's kind of taken up all my time since then. So, but I'll eventually get back into it.
You moved it from somewhere else to Vicksburg, or just from one building?
From within Vicksburg,
one building
yes.
to another building?
Yes, just a half mile up the street.
Okay. Okay, well, let's talk about your optometry practice. How did you get into being the eye doctor?
Well, my father was an optometrist.
Here in town?
In Bay Springs, Mississippi.
That's where you're from?
That's where I grew up. He started there in 1968 and retired in 2006, actually. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2009. But that's how I got into optometry. And when I got out of optometry school, I went to work for Jerry Hayes, and a lot of folks will remember him here in town. And in 2 years, he decided to sell the practice. So that's how I ended up being here.
How did you end up in Vicksburg? Was it to go in?
Jerry called and wanted me to come interview. He
Where
needed
did you
an
go to
associate
optometry school?
in Memphis at Southern College of Optometry.
Okay. And how long have you been in practice?
Since 1984. Was it
A few
27 years?
years.
Yeah, 26. Somewhere in there. We won't count.
Okay. Yeah, you and I both reached that. I told somebody the other day, I've reached the age where I order dessert first and go ahead and eat it, and then I'll order the meal. But I've earned the right to eat my dessert first if I want to.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, you're married and have a family. You've raised your children here. Tell me about your children.
Well, we have 4 children. Krista's the oldest with 2 grandchildren.
Congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
where is she?
She's here in town.
Okay.
And Philip is the next oldest, and he works for us at the clinic. He's the office manager. Mary is the next in line, and she is actually in optometry school right now out in Phoenix, Arizona. Hopefully she's finishing her first year this year, so hopefully she'll be back in 3 years.
You think she's going to come back here?
That's the game plan.
Go and practice with you? Okay.
And my youngest son is graduating Ole Miss next month.
And what's he going to do?
He is trying to get into physical therapy school. He's graduating in sports medicine.
And your wife, you left her
Teresa.
out. She might not appreciate
well, I thought we were talking about children. But anyway, yes, my wife is Teresa, and she works at the clinic also. She runs the office.
Okay. All right. Is there anything, not knowing much about astrophotography, is there anything I didn't ask you that you think people would find really interesting?
Well, the neatest thing about it, and the reason why I chose to do astrophotography, is that when you look at things through the telescope, the planets are very nice and rewarding. The moon is very rewarding to look at, lots of features to look at. But when you start seeing these pictures in the magazines of all the colors, the blues, the reds, and then you look at it through the telescope and it's not there. And the reason it's not is it's so dim the eye can't pick it up. And so in order to do that, you actually have to photograph it and expose the film or the digital camera, in our case, to long exposures to build up that time so that you can see it.
So the light is not there because of the refraction? Is that what it is?
Well, it's just so dim.
The darkness.
Right.
Gotcha.
And your eye works similar to a video camera is. It sees it and it's going on to the next frame. When you actually photograph it over long exposure time, you're adding up all that light so that you can build up the signal, is what we call it.
That's really interesting. I love it that you have pictures in your exam rooms. I'm used to going in and looking at diagrams of the eyeball and the eye chart and everything. And it was so much more interesting to sit there and wait on you. I didn't feel like, when is he going to get in here? You know, it was really interesting. It's a neat thing to have in your office.
Yeah, I already had the screensavers already on my home computer, and I started putting the computers in the exam room so I could see the eye photographs that we take of the patients. And I said, well, I might as well have the screensavers in here too.
Yeah.
So.
And who knew a year later we'd be sitting here talking?
That's right.
So, Chris, thank you so much for coming and having coffee with me today. This is very interesting.